Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is blurt, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. Luis, thank you so much for yet another great suggestion. Now let's take a moment and review the definition of this verb. The main way you're going to encounter the verb blurt being used can mean to say something suddenly and to say it generally without careful consideration. Though this might be saying something that is supposed to be kept quiet or not really be talked about. It might also refer to saying something without thinking about how a listener might receive that information. So this is, again, quick words kind of coming from one's mouth without a lot of deep thought. That's our main definition. For now, you should know that blurt is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms blurting. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. The base verb, blurt, ends in a T sound. This means the ed ending is going to make an id sound, and we're going to add an extra syllable to the word when we say it. The past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: blurted, blurted. Okay. Now, I do have one phrasal verb that you might encounter, that is to blurt out. The meaning here is not really all that different. So the definition here says to utter, which is another way to say, to utter something impulsively. That's another way to describe without careful consideration. So an example of this might be, did you just blurt out the secret? Right? So again, saying something that maybe wasn't supposed to be shared, it's lacking that thought of like, oh, I'm supposed to keep that quiet. Now let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we're going to review the imperative and the simple future. Let's start with the imperative. We use this verb tense to give a command. This is a direct statement, either telling someone to do a particular action or not do a particular action. We don't have any questions in the imperative. The imperative is also known or described as commands. So if that word's new for you, that's what it means. And there is something a little special or unique about the imperative. We will not have a stated subject. So we're not going to have a pronoun or a noun or maybe the name of a person, place, or thing as our subject. We're just going to begin our affirmative or positive sentences with the base verb. Okay? And the reason for that is our subject is generally understood. It's you, the person to whom I am speaking, or maybe to the person if I'm writing, right? Maybe texting or emailing, same idea there. So it's either you singular or you plural, and our verb is going to look the same. So an example of this verb being used in the imperative is this. Let's brainstorm for a few minutes. Blurt out any ideas you have. So maybe someone's leading a meeting, maybe a teacher's leading some kind of exercise with her students or his students, and they're giving this command, right? They are encouraging people to say things without a lot of thought. That can be really important during brainstorming. Not that we're judging ideas or trying to refine them or make them perfect, but that just we're trying to generate. And so it might be okay to say something impulsively. Now, if you want to make a negative imperative sentence, what you should do is start with do not and then the base verb. You might also see the contraction, don't, and then the base verb. So again, here the command is to not do a particular action. An example of this might be, don't blurt out any answers. I know as a teacher, I've used this with my students sometimes when I just want them to think a little bit on their own before they start hearing others' answers or ideas. So that might be one reason to encourage people not to say things quite yet. One last note about the imperative. Sometimes students tell me that it feels a little uncomfortable to either speak or write so directly and tell someone to do a particular action. You can always add the word please to the beginning of an imperative or please at the end of the sentence, but really just one place will do. This will work in the affirmative or in positive sentences. It also works with negative. So if that helps you feel a bit more polite, by all means, use that word. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the simple future. Today we're going to focus on sentences with will. Will is most commonly used as people make predictions and promises. People might use it to make an offer as well. You will hear people use it to discuss their plans, but sometimes they're doing that because they're not quite as confident about the likelihood of this particular action occurring in the future. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple future with will is that our structure to the sentence will stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we'll start with our subject, we're going to use will, and then that base verb. You can see an example of this here. Cell phones will blurt an emergency alert on Wednesday. Now, this sentence is something I observed being used in a few different publications. I think they were newspapers or like city blogs trying to tell residents about these kind of upcoming alarms and wanting people not to panic that it was sort of a real thing. So sometimes these are done as tests. But I think the reason people were choosing to use this is it's going to sound very sudden without warning, and maybe to catch people's attention that way. Now let's look at making a negative simple future. To do this, what we want to do is start with our subject, use will not, and then the base verb. Now, will not can also have a contraction form that's won't, pronounced with a long O sound. That's WON'. I've used that in my example here. I won't blurt the surprise. So maybe this is someone making a promise, right? I'm not going to say anything without that careful thought about who might be hearing the news. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple future, start with will, then use your subject, then the base verb. Here's the last example. Will he blurt something out at the wrong moment or to the wrong person? I saw variations of this question being asked by a number of commentators and maybe even a few editorial writers, journalists, speaking about the President of the United States and kind of that idea of speaking without careful consideration. It seems like that happens quite frequently. So maybe that will help you remember the definition of blurt. Now, one last thing for us to discuss, and that's a related word. I just have one example of it today, and it's the noun blurter. Blurter. So that ER suffix, I was trying to stress that initially, always tells us this is going to be a person or thing who, and then we can go back to that base definition of our verb. So this is a person who says something either suddenly or impulsively. They may be doing it without thinking, without giving it consideration, and usually there's a little bit of regret, right? Like you'd want to be able to put the words back in your mouth. So an example of this in a sentence: are you a blurter or a brooder? And I think this might lead Luis to making another suggestion. So someone who broods, really thinks very carefully and deeply, they're going to keep their words and thoughts to themselves, right? Whereas that blurter is someone who's just going to say whatever comes to their mind without a lot of thought or consideration. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.